transmission lasted exactly to 0.7 seconds. Admiral Vexheim Morvithik stared at the holographic display with 3 of his 6 eyes, while the other 3 scanned the terrified faces of his bridge crew. The hegemony had ruled the outer spiral for 6,000 years, and in all that time, no species had dared venture into Sector 7 Alpha, the region they had declared forbidden to all sentient life. Yet there was, clear as starlight, a human voice speaking in their crude, guttural language. Control, this is Echo 7. We have visual on the structure. Beginning descent. The message had been intercepted by a hegemony listening post 3 rotations ago. Since then, every star chart, every navigation beacon, every quantum relay in that entire sector had been systematically erased from galactic databases. The Cartographers Guild had been given emergency orders to black out everything within a 50 light-year radius. Tell me again, Sensor Prime Kelvok. Morvithik's voice carried the weight of ancient authority. How certain are we of the translation? The slender, blue-skinned officer's membrane ears fluttered nervously. 97.4%. Certainty, Admiral. The linguistic patterns match archived human communications from the colonial expansion period. Morvithik's claws scraped against his command throne. Humans, the galaxy's newest spacefaring species, barely a centuries since their first primitive fusion drives had carried them beyond their home system. The hegemony had been watching them with amused tolerance of species so young. They still fought wars over resources that could be synthesized. So primitive they hadn't even discovered zero-point energy. But Sector 7 Alpha was different. It contained something that predated the hegemony itself. Something so dangerous that the ancient architects had sealed it away behind barriers that even their technology couldn't fully understand. The sector had been off limits for millennia, protected by automated defense networks that could obliterate entire fleets, sir. Communications Officer Nethora spoke with careful precision. The High Council is demanding an immediate audience. There. Concerned. Morvithik almost laughed. The High Council was terrified. For 6,000 years, they had built their empire on the assumption that certain boundaries would never be crossed, that certain sleeping giants would never be awakened. Admiral, Science Prime Yathek's voice cut through his thoughts. We're receiving another transmission from the same region. The bridge fell silent. Morvithik's mandibles clicked once, a gesture that had sent fear through 100 species. Play it. The voice was different this time. Younger, more excited. Holy shit, Marcus. Are you seeing this? The energy readings are off the charts. This isn't just a structure, it's a machine. And it's still active. Static followed. Then, get back to the ship, Reeves. Something's happening to the containment fields. The transmission cut to white noise. Morvithik stood slowly, his massive frame casting shadows across the bridge. He had fought in the Triarch Wars, had personally overseen the subjugation of 17 species. He had seen civilizations rise and fall, had watched stars die and be reborn. But he had never seen the High Council truly afraid. Helm, set course for Sector 7 Alpha. Maximum burn. Sir, Navigation Prime Voss's voice cracked. The sector is restricted under hegemony protocol. I am aware of the protocols. Navigation Prime. Morvithik's tone could have frozen methane. I helped write them. But if humans have breached the containment zone, then we are already past the point where protocols matter. As the massive dreadnought Eternal Dominion turned toward the forbidden sector, Morvithik stared out at the stars and wondered if he was making the greatest mistake in hegemony history. The humans had no idea what they were dealing with. They had stumbled into a quarantine zone that contained something so dangerous, so utterly catastrophic, that it had shaped the political structure of the entire galaxy. But there was something else gnawing at the edges of his consciousness, something that made his survival instincts scream warnings. If the humans had somehow bypassed defenses that had held for millennia, if they had actually reached the installation itself, what if they weren't the bumbling primitives the hegemony had always assumed them to be? What if humanity had been hiding something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined? The stars stretched into lines as the ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying them toward answers that Morvithik was no longer certain he wanted to find. The UES Pathfinder hung in space like a metal splinter against the cosmic darkness, its hull scarred from atmospheric entry and micrometeorite impacts. Captain Torvin Aldrich watched the massive alien structure through the observation deck's reinforced transperistel, trying to process what his team had discovered. The installation was enormous, easily 50 kilometers across. constructed from materials that seemed to bend light around their edges. Geometric patterns that hurt to look at, directly covered its surface, pulsing with energy signatures that made their sensors scream. Warnings. It hung in perfect gravitational balance between three dead stars, as if the entire system had been engineered around it. Captain, Dr. Lisa Reeves called from the archaeology lab, her voice tight with barely controlled excitement. You need to see this. The inscriptions we've translated, they're not from any known galactic civilization. These symbols predate everything in our xenoarchaeological databases by millions of years. Aldous turned from the window. How millions? The radiometric dating is consistent across 17 different test sites. Sir, this thing was built before the dinosaurs walked Earth, before complex life existed on most worlds in the galaxy, before Aldous could respond. The ship's proximity alarms began screaming. Lieutenant Commander Philip Norquist's voice cut through the chaos from the bridge. Captain, to the bridge immediately. We have incoming vessels. Unknown configuration, massive energy signatures. Aldous sprinted through the corridors, reaching the bridge just as three enormous ships dropped out of hyperspace. They were beautiful in their alien architecture, sleek curves and organic lines that suggested they had been grown rather than built. Each vessel was easily 10 times the size of the Pathfinder. Captain, Sensor Operator Elena Vasquez reported, her hands flying over her console. They're not responding to any standard communication protocols. Energy signatures suggest advanced weapon systems, shields that our computers can't even classify. Sir, Communications Officer Dmitry Volkov's voice carried a note of urgency. They're transmitting something. It's in over 40 different languages, including ours. On speakers, the voice that filled the bridge was deep, resonant. An utterly alien, human vessel, you have violated the most sacred prohibition in galactic law. By entering Sector 7 Alpha, you have committed an act of war against the hegemony and all member species. Withdraw immediately or face annihilation. Aldous felt his jaw tighten. Transmit on all frequencies. This is Captain Torvin Aldous of the United Earth ship Pathfinder. We are conducting peaceful scientific research in unclaimed space. We have committed no act of war and recognize no authority to restrict our movements. 30 seconds of silence stretched across the void. When the alien voice returned, it carried a note of what might have been surprise. You claim ignorance of hegemony law. Impossible. All spacefaring species are informed of the restrictions within 48 hours of achieving faster than light capability. Well, apparently someone forgot to send us the memo. Aldous kept his voice level. Professional. We're willing to discuss territorial claims through proper diplomatic channels, but we won't be intimidated into abandoning legitimate scientific research. This time the silence lasted longer. When it broke, a different voice spoke older, carrying immense authority. I am Admiral Vexheim Morvathek of the Hegemony 4th Fleet. Human. Do you have any concept of what you have found? Aldous exchanged glances with his senior staff. We found a pre-galactic artifact of immense scientific value. If you have historical knowledge that could aid our research, we'd welcome the opportunity to collaborate. Collaborate? The Admiral's voice carried what sounded like horrified disbelief. You ignorant primitive, that installation contains technology that could unravel the fabric of reality itself. It was sealed away by species whose names are forgotten for a reason, sir. Tactical Officer Morgan Reed spoke quietly. All three vessels are powering weapons. Reading massive energy buildups, Aldous felt the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. Humanity's first contact with galactic civilization, and it was happening over what appeared to be the archaeological discovery of the millennium. He thought of the ancient installation hanging behind them, of the secrets it might contain, of the knowledge that could advance human civilization by thousands of years. Admiral Morvathek, he said slowly, humanity doesn't back down from threats. We don't abandon our people, and we don't surrender our right to explore the universe. If you want us to leave, you'll have to make us. The tactical display lit up like a Christmas tree as all three alien vessels locked weapons on the tiny human ship. Captain, Reed reported, her voice steady despite the impossible odds. They've got enough firepower to glass a planet. Our shields won't hold for more than a few seconds. Aldous looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew humans, who had volunteered for a one-way mission to the edge of known space, who had left behind families and careers for the chance to push the boundaries of human knowledge. They weren't soldiers, but they were explorers, and they understood what was at stake. All hands. This is the captain. We came here to make history. It looks like we're about to make it in a way we didn't expect. Stand to your stations. Make humanity proud. The first energy beams lance through space, striking the Pathfinder's shields with the force of a small sun. The Pathfinder bucked like a wounded animal as alien energy beams hammered her shields. Sparks erupted from overloaded consoles across the bridge, and the smell of burning circuitry filled the air. Shields down to 60%. Reed shouted over the sound of groaning metal. Hold breaches on decks 4 and 7. Captain Aldous gripped his command chair as another volley struck home. The hegemony vessels were toying with them, using just enough firepower to cripple, but not destroy. They wanted the humans alive for questioning. Sir, Norquist called from the helm. I'm reading some kind of interference pattern from the ancient installation. It's affecting their targeting systems. Through the chaos. Dr. Reeves' voice crackled over the comm. Captain, I'm reading massive energy fluctuations from the artifact. Our presence or maybe the weapons fire it's triggering some kind of automated response. Aldous made a decision that would haunt his dreams. Set course for the installation. Emergency burn. Sir, Norquist's hands hesitated over the controls. The energy readings are off the charts. Hitting the close could kill us all. Aldous finished grimly, but staying here definitely will. Do it. The Pathfinder dove toward the ancient structure as the hegemony vessels pursued. Their weapons fire became increasingly erratic as they approached the installation. Energy beams bending at impossible angles or simply dissipating into quantum foam. Admiral Morvithic's voice thundered across the communication channels. Reckless fool. You will doom us all. Withdraw immediately, Captain, Reeves called. Her voice tight with excitement and terror. The installation is responding to our approach. Sections are unfolding. Power levels are increasing exponentially. Through the view screen, they watched in awe as the massive structure began to change. Geometric sections rotated and extended, revealing inner chambers that pulsed with light that seemed to exist in colors that had no names. Energy patterns raced along its surface like neural pathways in some vast brain awakening from eons of sleep. Sir, Vasquez reported, her voice barely audible over the rising harmonic hum that seemed to emanate from the artifact itself. I'm detecting scanning beams. It's analyzing our ship. Analyzing us. The lead hegemony vessel fired a full spread of plasma torpedoes, not at the Pathfinder, but at the installation itself. The weapon struck an invisible barrier 50 meters from the structure surface and simply vanished, as if they had never existed. Admiral Morvithic's voice carried desperation now. Human vessel, listen to me. The architects built that installation as a containment system. Inside that structure is something that consumed entire star systems. If you breach the containment, his words were cut off as beams of coherent energy erupted from the installation, striking all four ships simultaneously. The Pathfinder shuddered as alien energies washed over her hull, but the hegemony vessels, they began to change. Jesus Christ, Reed whispered, staring at her tactical display. Their hull configurations are shifting. Their weapons are being rewritten. On the view screen, they watched as the sleek alien warships transformed. Their elegant curves straightened into harsh angles. Their organic-looking hulls became crystalline and sharp, where weapon emplacements had been. New devices emerged, things that hurt to look at directly and seemed to bend space around themselves. Captain, Dr. Reeves' voice was barely controlled panic. The energy signatures from those ships, they're identical to the installation now. Whatever technology built this place, it's rewriting their vessels to match its own specifications. A new voice filled the bridge, not Morvithic's, but something that spoke in harmonics that bypassed the ears and resonated directly in their minds. Verification protocols incomplete. Biological patterns recognized. Containment breach imminent. Initiating emergency sterilization sequence. The installation began to unfold further, revealing weapons that dwarfed anything in the hegemony arsenal. Energy began building in chamber after chamber, preparing to sterilize everything within 100 light years. All ships are receiving the same transmission, Volkov reported, his face pale. It's addressing all of us as architect remnants and demanding immediate genetic verification. If we can't provide proper authorization codes, it's going to activate something called a reality purge through the communication channels. They could hear the hegemony crews screaming as their ships continued to transform around them. Admiral Morvithic's voice, when it came, was barely recognizable. Human ship. The transformation is changing us too. My crew, we're becoming something else. Captain Aldrich looked at his crew, exhausted, terrified, but still human, still fighting. All stop. Kill the engines, sir? Whatever that thing is, it's been asleep for millions of years. Our approach woke it up. But maybe if we show it, we're not a threat. He keyed the ship-wide intercom. All hands. This is the captain. Power down all weapons systems. Minimal. Life support only. We're going to try something that's either brilliant or suicidal. He opened a channel to the installation, a known entity. This is Captain Torvin Aldrich of the human species. We didn't know this was a containment facility. We're explorers, not warriors. We pose no threat to whatever you're protecting. The harmonic voice responded immediately. Genetic patterns unknown. Species designation unavailable in architect databases. Probability of contamination undetermined. Scanning for verification markers. Energy beam swept over the Pathfinder again, this time gentler, more analytical. Around them, the transformed hegemony ships hung motionless. Their crews trapped in a metamorphosis that was rewriting their very DNA. And deep within the installation, something ancient and terrible was beginning to stir. The scanning beam held the Pathfinder in its grip for 17 agonizing minutes. Captain Aldrich felt it probe not just their ship, but their minds, their very genetic code. When it finally ceased, the silence that followed was more terrifying than any weapon discharge. Anomaly detected, the harmonic voice announced. Species classification unknown. Genetic markers unprecedented. Probability of architect origin 0.03%. Initiating preservation protocol. What the hell does that mean? Reed whispered. Their answer came as the three transformed hegemony vessels suddenly opened fire not at the Pathfinder, but at each other. The weapons they now carried tore through their crystalline hulls like paper, spilling atmosphere and crew into the void. My God, Dr. Reeves breathed. It's using them to eliminate witnesses. Admiral Morvithic's voice, barely recognizable through the transformation, crackled across the communications. Human vessel. The change cannot be stopped. My crew, becoming part of the installation's network. You must escape before. His transmission cut to static as his flagship exploded in a brilliant flash of unnatural light. Sir, Vasquez reported, her voice hollow. I'm detecting escape pods from the hegemony vessels. Maybe 3 dozen survivors total. They're screaming. Through the view screen, they could see the small craft drifting in space. Their hulls already beginning to show the same crystalline transformation. Whatever technology the installation used, it was spreading like a virus, rewriting matter at the molecular level. Captain, Norquist called urgently. We're being pulled toward the installation. Gravitational field is increasing exponentially. The Pathfinder was drawn inexorably toward one of the massive structure's docking bays. As they approached, Aldrich could see that the bay was designed for ships far larger than anything in the human fleet. Vessels that would dwarf even the hegemony dreadnoughts. New transmission coming in, Volkov reported. It's different. The harmonics are more complex. The voice that filled the bridge now carried undertones of what might have been curiosity. Species designation, human, genetic analysis complete. Fascinating. You possess markers consistent with multiple extinct species. Your DNA contains elements. OF, impossible. Scanning error presumed. Captain, Dr. Reeves called from her lab. I'm reading massive data transfers to our computers. It's downloading our entire database history. Science, culture, everything. Warning lights flash across every console as alien code invaded their systems. But instead of taking control, the installation seemed to be learning. Remarkable. The voice continued. Species human demonstrates unprecedented adaptability. Survival under impossible conditions. Expansion rate exceeds theoretical maximums. Aggressive tendencies balanced by cooperative behaviors. Most intriguing. The ship settled into the docking bay with surprising gentleness. Atmosphere flooded the chamber, but their sensors detected gravitational anomalies that made Aldrich's skin crawl. Space itself seemed unstable here, reality warping at the edges of perception. Sir, Reed's voice was tight with professional control. I'm reading massive energy signatures throughout the installation. Whatever was contained here is not contained anymore. Power levels are climbing toward critical thresholds. Through the docking bay's transparent walls, they could see into the installation's interior. Vast chambers stretched away into impossible distances, filled with machinery that operated on principles human science couldn't comprehend. And moving through those chambers were shapes that had once been hegemony crew members. now transformed into something between organic and machine. Proposal, the installation announced. Species human will be granted temporary preservation status. Your genetic markers indicate potential compatibility with architect legacy protocols. Cooperation will result in survival. Resistance will result in integration. What kind of cooperation? Aldous asked. Though he suspected he wouldn't like the answer. The containment breach is irreversible. The Devourer has awakened. Your species will serve as biological templates for reconstruction protocols. In exchange, partial autonomy will be preserved. Dr. Reeves' voice cut through the bridge. Captain, I'm reading massive quantum fluctuations from the installation's core. Something is happening to space-time itself. We're not just looking at advanced technology. This thing is rewriting the laws of physics in localized areas. Sir, Vasquez added urgently, long-range sensors are detecting ships approaching, dozens of them. It looks like a hegemony response fleet. Through the view screen, they watched as a massive armada dropped out of hyperspace, hundreds of vessels, ranging from destroyers to planet killers. The hegemony had committed everything they had to preventing whatever was in Sector 7 Alpha from escaping. The installation's response was immediate and devastating. Beams of energy that existed in dimensions human mathematics couldn't ascribe lanced out, striking the approaching fleet. Ships didn't explode, they simply ceased to exist, edited out of reality as if they had never been built. But the hegemony fleet kept coming, their captains choosing certain death over the alternative. They knew, as the installation's creators had known millions of years ago, that some threats were too terrible to allow to escape into the galaxy. Estimated time to containment failure, 37 minutes. The installation announced with mechanical calm. Devourer awakening sequence. Initiated, reality anchor protocols failing. Recommendation, immediate evacuation of galactic region. Captain Aldous looked at his crew, at the transformed horrors that had once been hegemony soldiers, at the cosmic battlefield outside where an ancient evil was stirring to life. Humanity had stumbled into something far beyond their understanding. But they were here now, and retreat was no longer an option. Dr. Reeves, he said quietly, is there any way to reverse the containment failure? I don't know, sir, but if we're going to try, we need to reach the installation's core. And according to these readings, that's where the Devourer is waking up. The tactical display showed more hegemony fleets approaching, knowing they flew to certain death. Outside, reality itself was beginning to fray at the edges as something ancient and hungry stirred in the depths of space. Humanity's first contact with galactic civilization had become something far more. The opening moves in a war for the survival of existence itself. The hegemony's second battle fleet consisted of 843 vessels, representing the combined military might of 17 different species. Admiral Kestara Vindic commanded from the super dreadnought Eternal Retribution, a ship so massive it carried its own planetary defense grid. She watched through the tactical hologram as her fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect battle formation, only to see the installation's reality-warping weapons tear through her vanguard like a scythe through wheat. 12 destroyers and 4 cruisers simply stopped existing, leaving behind empty space and confused sensor readings. All units, commence bombardment pattern Omega-7, she commanded, her 4 hearts beating in synchronization. Target, the installation's power nodes. We don't need to destroy it, just force it back into dormancy. The combined firepower of nearly 1,000 ships converged on the ancient structure. Plasma cannons, antimatter torpedoes, quantum disruptors, and weapons that existed only in hegemony black sights, all of it focused on a single target. The installation shields held for exactly 3.2 seconds. When they failed, the structure itself began to burn. Sections exploded in brilliant flashes as exotic energies tore through alien metals. For a moment, Admiral Vindic allowed herself to hope. Then the Devourer began to emerge. It came through tears in reality itself, a presence so vast and alien that most organic minds simply refused to process what they were seeing. The bridge crew of the Eternal Retribution began screaming as their consciousness tried to interpret something that existed across 17 different dimensions simultaneously. All ships, fall back to minimum safe distance, Vindic ordered, fighting to keep her own sanity intact. Initiate psionic shields. Do not look directly at the entity. But it was too late for many vessels. The Devourer's mere presence was enough to drive crews insane, to cause ships to fire on their own allies as corrupted minds interpreted friends as enemies. The light cruiser Swift Vengeance opened fire on its own escorts. its captain convinced that the universe had been invaded by hostile shapeshifters. Through the chaos, Admiral Vindic watched in horror as the entity continued to emerge from its dimensional prison. It wasn't a ship or a creature in any sense she could understand. It was hunger-given form, a cosmic appetite that had been contained for millions of years and was now free to feed. "Sir," her tactical officer reported, his voice shaking. "The entity is eating space itself. Wherever it passes, the quantum foam is being consumed. Stars in adjacent systems are beginning to flicker. The ancient installation, now partially destroyed, was fighting back. Automated systems that had slumbered for eons came online, deploying weapons that turned physics into a suggestion rather than a law. Reality anchors drove stakes through dimensional barriers, trying to force the devourer back into its prison. But the damage was done. The containment was broken, and each passing second allowed more of the entity to emerge into normal space-time. Aboard the Pathfinder, Captain Aldris watched the battle through sensors that screamed warnings with every reading. The hegemony fleet was losing badly. Ships were being consumed not just physically, but temporally, their past and future being devoured, along with their present. "Captain," Dr. Reeves called from her position at the science station, "I've been analyzing the installation's control systems. There's a central core that's still functional. If we could reach it, we might be able to reinitialize the containment protocols." "Might be able to," Aldris asked grimly. "The architects designed multiple failsafes, but they're all locked behind genetic verification systems. The installation would need to recognize us as authorized personnel." Through the viewscreen, they watched as a hegemony dreadnought tried to ram the devourer directly. The massive ship struck the entity and simply unraveled. Its constituent atoms spread across multiple timelines until it had never existed to begin with. "Sir," Reed reported, "the installation's AI is trying to communicate with us again." The harmonic voice filled the bridge, but now it carried notes of desperation. "Species human. Genetic markers indicate possible architect legacy status. Emergency protocols require immediate verification. Containment failure accelerating. Galactic. Sterilization imminent." "What do you need?" Aldris asked. "Direct neural interface with installation core. Warning. Probability of organic survival during interface, 17%. Alternative. Total galactic extinction, 94.7%. Another hegemony fleet group arrived reinforcements from the core worlds. Admiral Vindic watched as her own flagship sister ship, the Unbreakable Will, materialized directly in the Devourer's path. The ship's captain had attempted a precision jump to deliver a Nova bomb directly to the entity's center mass. The bomb detonated, releasing the energy of an exploding star in a focused beam. For a moment, the Devourer's advance slowed, then it began to feed on the explosion itself, growing larger as it consumed the nuclear fire. "All ships, this is Admiral Vindic." She transmitted across all frequencies. "The entity is feeding on our weapons. Conventional attacks are only making it stronger. Recommend immediate evacuation of the sector." But even as she spoke, she knew it was too late. The Devourer had grown large enough to affect entire star systems. Its presence was causing spatial distortions that made faster-than-light travel impossible. The fleets that had come to fight were now trapped, forced to watch as an ancient evil consumed everything around them. "Captain," Norquist called urgently, "the installation is opening new docking ports. It's asking us to come aboard." Aldris looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were terrified, exhausted, and completely out of their depth. They were also the only hope for every living thing in the galaxy. "All hands, this is the captain," he announced over the ship's intercom. "We're going aboard the installation. We're going to try to fix what we accidentally broke. If we don't make it back, remember that we tried to do the right thing." Outside, the battle raged on as the hegemony fleets threw everything they had at an enemy that grew stronger. With each attack, ships fell like leaves in a hurricane, their crews dying in battles their minds couldn't fully comprehend. And in the depths of space, something that had devoured civilizations before life existed on Earth continued its inexorable emergence into a universe that had forgotten the meaning of true terror. The installation's corridors stretched into impossible distances, defying human understanding of architecture in space. Captain Aldris led his team through passages that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, their walls covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. Dr. Reeves moved beside him, her scanner reading energy patterns that shouldn't exist. "Captain," The quantum flux in here is off the charts. Space-time is so unstable that we could walk through that door and emerge in a completely different century. Behind them, the reduced crew of the Pathfinder followed in grim silence. They had left half their people aboard the ship. Someone had to maintain life support and try to monitor the battle outside. Now 8 humans walked through the bowels of a machine older than their species. The ward of fate none of them fully understood. Proceed to designation 77 Alpha. The installation's voice guided them. Neural interface chamber prepared. For architect legacy verification, they emerged into a vast chamber that defied description. The ceiling extended upward beyond the range of their lights, supported by columns that seemed to be made of crystallized time itself. In the center of the space stood a structure that hurt to perceive directly, a throne-like construct, surrounded by neural interface cables that moved with organic fluidity. Jesus. Lieutenant Commander Norquist whispered. How many beings died to build this place? Incorrect assumption. The installation responded to his words. Construction completed by volunteer synthesis. Architect species chose integration to preserve galactic stability. Survival, 0. Success, 97.3%. The meaning hit them like a physical blow. The architects hadn't just built this prison, they had sacrificed their entire civilization to maintain it, transforming themselves into the installation's operating system. Captain, Dr. Reeves said quietly, the neural interface isn't designed for human physiology. If you connect to it. She couldn't finish the sentence. Through the chamber's transparent walls, they could see the battle raging outside. The hegemony fleets were down to fewer than 100 ships, and those were falling rapidly. The Devourer had grown large enough to engulf entire moons, its presence causing nearby stars to flicker and dim. Genetic verification required immediately, the installation announced. Containment failure reaches critical threshold in 4 minutes, 17 seconds. Probability of successful rate containment decreasing exponentially. Aldris approached the neural interface, studying the alien technology that could burn out his mind in seconds. What exactly will this process involve? Complete neural integration with installation consciousness. Verification of genetic authorization. If successful, emergency containment protocols will be accessible. If unsuccessful, organic dissolution will occur within nanoseconds. And if I don't try it, universal entropy, the Devourer will consume all matter, energy, and space-time within 7 hours. 32 minutes. Galactic extinction, absolute. Dr. Reeves grabbed his arm. Sir, there has to be another way. We can't ask you to. You're not asking, Aldris said quietly. I'm volunteering. He turned to his crew, looking at each face in turn. Get back to the ship. Monitor the interface process. If this works, you'll know. If it doesn't, he managed a grim smile. Tell Earth's government that we found something out here. Tell them to be ready. Captain. Tactical Officer Reed stepped forward. With respect, sir, I volunteer to take your place. You're needed to command the mission, as do I, Dr. Reeves added. I understand the technology better than anyone. One by one, his entire team volunteered to take his place. Aldris felt a surge of pride that cut through his terror. This was humanity at its finest, people willing to die for strangers they'd never met, for a galaxy that had tried to kill them minutes after first contact. I appreciate the offers, he said firmly, but I'm the captain. This is my responsibility. He approached the neural interface, placing his hands on the organic-looking control surfaces. They were warm, almost alive, and they seemed to respond to his touch by extending hair-thin filaments toward his head, initiating neural interface. The installation announced, warning, process will be traumatic. Maintain consciousness for 97 seconds to complete verification sequence. The filaments touched his temples, and Aldris screamed. Pain beyond description flooded his nervous system as alien technology interfaced directly with his brain. But worse than the pain was the sudden awareness he could feel the installation's vast consciousness, the accumulated knowledge and anguish of an entire species that had died to protect the galaxy. He could see through sensors scattered across light years of space, watching the Devourer tear through reality itself like tissue paper. He felt the desperation of the architect minds that still existed within the installation's matrix, their consciousness preserved in digital torment for millions of years. And then, impossibly, he felt something else. Recognition, genetic verification. Anomalous, the installation's voice carried a note of confusion that hadn't been there before. Species human genetic markers, impossible. detecting architect remnant sequences. Through the neural link, Aldous saw the truth that had been hidden in humanity's DNA for millions of years. The architects hadn't gone extinct, they had seeded dozens of worlds with their genetic material before their sacrifice, hoping that evolution would eventually produce a species capable of maintaining their prison. Humanity wasn't just another upstart species. They were the architect's children, shaped by eons of evolution into the key that could lock away cosmic horrors. Verification complete, the installation announced, and suddenly Aldous could feel the vast machinery responding to his thoughts. Emergency containment protocols accessible. Warning: activation will require complete neural integration. Organic survival impossible. Through the pain, Aldous managed to speak to his crew. Get back to the ship. Tell them, we're not alone in the universe. And we never were. Dr. Reeves was crying openly now. Captain, there has to be another way. But Aldous was already sinking deeper into the interface, his consciousness merging with the installation's vast network. He could feel his human identity fragmenting, becoming part of something larger, older, and infinitely more complex outside. The Devourer continued its advance, now large enough to cast shadows across entire solar systems. The remaining hegemony ships fell back in desperate retreat, their crews driven mad by proximity to the entity, and in the depths of an ancient machine, a human captain prepared to join the eternal vigil that protected the galaxy from horrors. Beyond imagination, containment sequence initiated, the installation announced. Probability of success, 63.7%. Estimated time to completion, 147 seconds. The battle for existence itself had begun. Captain Torvin Aldous no longer existed as a single consciousness. His mind had scattered across the installation's vast network, touching systems that spanned dimensions he couldn't have imagined as a mere human. But somewhere in that distributed awareness, the core of who he was remained a stubborn, determined explorer who refused to let the universe in on his watch. Through sensors that perceived reality in 17 different spectrums, he watched the Devourers advance slow as the installation's containment systems came online. Dimensional anchors drove deep into space-time itself, creating barriers that even cosmic hunger couldn't easily breach. But the entity fought back with the fury of something that had been imprisoned for geological ages. Its assault on the barriers sent shockwaves through local space, causing stars to nova and entire planets to phase out of existence. The remaining hegemony fleet, now fewer than 30 ships, could only watch in awe and terror as forces beyond their comprehension battled for the fate of everything. Containment matrix holding, Aldous heard himself announce through the installation speakers, though his voice now carried harmonics that no human throat could produce. Devour advance reduced by 73%. Probability of successful. Ray imprisonment increasing on the Pathfinder. Dr. Reeves monitored the energy readings with tears streaming down her face. She could see the neural patterns on her scanner. What had been Captain Aldous was now distributed across quantum processing nodes throughout the installation. His consciousness preserved, but transformed beyond recognition. He's still in there, she whispered to the remaining crew. I can detect his brainwave patterns, but they're different, enhanced. He's become part of the machine. Through the view screen, they watched as the installation deployed weapons that turned the laws of physics into suggestions. Space-time itself became a battlefield, as reality anchors drove the Devourer back toward its dimensional prison. But the entity's resistance was ferocious wherever it touched the normal universe. Matter simply ceased to exist, creating expanding voids of absolute nothingness. Requiring additional power for final containment sequence, Aldous' transformed voice announced. Organic crew of vessel Pathfinder, evacuation strongly recommended. But Dr. Reeves had been analyzing the power distribution systems. Captain, she called out, hoping some part of him could still hear her. The installation's main reactor is damaged. You need a supplemental power source for the final push. Correct assessment. Searching for viable alternatives. What about our ship's reactor? She suggested desperately. If we could create a direct power link. There was a pause that seemed to last forever. When Aldous responded, his voice carried echoes of the human he had been, extremely dangerous. Power feedback would destroy vessel and all organic life aboard. But it would work. Probability of successful containment would increase to 97.4%. Dr. Reeves looked around at the remaining crew, 8 humans who had traveled farther from Earth than any of their species, who had witnessed the birth and death of cosmic entities, who had learned that their DNA carried the legacy of a species that had died to protect the galaxy. All in favor of saving the universe? She asked quietly. The vote was unanimous. Working with desperate efficiency, they began rerouting the Pathfinder's reactor output through the installation's power grid. It was jury-rigged engineering at its finest. Human improvisation merged with architect technology to create something that shouldn't have been possible. Power link established, Aldous announced. Final containment sequence initiating. Organic crew, prepare for reactor overload in 60 seconds. Through the neural link, Aldous could feel the installation's massive machinery drawing power from the tiny human ship. It was like using a teacup to fill an ocean, but it was enough to tip the balance. The dimensional barrier solidified, reality anchors locked into place, and the Devourer's escape route began to collapse. The entity's death scream was heard across 17 dimensions simultaneously. It fought with the fury of something that had consumed galaxies, but the prison that had held it for millions of years was reasserting itself, slowly, inexorably. The cosmic horror was drawn back into its dimensional cage, aboard the Pathfinder. Dr. Reeves watched the reactor readings climb toward critical. 30 seconds to overload. She called out calmly, "It's been an honor serving with you all." But as the readings reached the red line, something unexpected happened. The power draw suddenly stopped, and the reactor stabilized. "Containment successful," Aldous announced, and for a moment his voice carried purely human relief. Devourer re-imprisoned, dimensional barriers restored, galactic threat neutralized. Through the view screen, they watched as the ancient installation began to fold in on itself, returning to its dormant configuration. The tiers in space-time sealed themselves, and the cosmic battlefield returned to normal space. Where the Devourer had been, there was now only empty void, but it was contained void. Safely locked away from the rest of reality, the surviving hegemony ships approached cautiously, their crews still struggling to process what they had witnessed. Admiral Vindok's voice came across the communication channels, filled with a mixture of awe and terror. "Human vessel Pathfinder, this is Admiral Vindok of the Hegemony 4th Fleet. On behalf of all galactic civilization, we owe you a debt that can never be repaid." Dr. Reeves keyed the response. "This is Dr. Lysa Reeves, acting captain of the Pathfinder. We did what anyone would have done." "No," Vindok replied quietly. "You did what only humans would have done. You sacrificed everything for people you never met, for species that had tried to kill you. The galaxy will remember." Over the following hours, as damage reports came in from across the sector, the true scope of what had been prevented became clear. The Devourer's brief emergence had consumed 37 star systems completely, but without the installation's containment, it would have devoured the entire galaxy within days. "Installation returning to dormant status," Aldous announced, his voice now carrying the weight of eons. "Organic crew of Pathfinder, departure window available for 4 to 7 minutes." Dr. Reeves approached the neural interface chamber one last time. "Captain Torvin, are you still in there?" A pause, then, in a voice that was unmistakably human despite its electronic harmonics, "I'm here, Lysa. Changed, but still here, still watching. The galaxy is safe, and that's what matters. Is there any way to reverse the process? To bring you back?" "I am back. I'm exactly where I need to be. This installation needs a human perspective, someone who understands that every life matters." The architects were brilliant, but they thought in terms of galactic preservation. Humans, we think in terms of individual people. As the Pathfinder prepared to depart, Aldous' voice followed them. "Tell Earth what happened here. Tell them that humanity has a responsibility now, not just to explore the universe, but to protect it. We're not alone, and we never were. We're the inheritors of something ancient and sacred." The ship emerged from the installation's docking bay into normal space, where the Hegemony fleet waited. Admiral Vindok's message was waiting for them. "Dr. Reeves, the High Council has asked me to extend an invitation. Humanity will be granted full membership in the galactic hegemony, with all rights and privileges. Your species has proven itself worthy of the greatest respect." But as they began the long journey home, Dr. Reeves found herself thinking not about politics or treaties, but about a stubborn ship captain who had looked into the abyss and decided that someone had to stand guard. Somewhere behind them, in the depths of an ancient machine, Torvin Aldous continued his eternal watch. No longer human, but still possessed of humanity's greatest virtue, he refused to give up. The sector maps would remain blacked out, the installation's location a closely guarded secret, but the galaxy was safe, protected by an alliance of ancient wisdom and human determination. And in the depths of space, a whisper of human consciousness stood ready to face whatever other horrors might threaten the stars. The universe was vast and full of terrors, but it was also full of heroes willing to stand against the dark. Humanity had found its place among the stars not as conquerors or explorers, but as guardians, and that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all.